Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm Michael Mactier, and this is Murder in Michigan. Matthew Macon. In 2005, a series of grisly murders would begin against some of society's most vulnerable members. Women, both elderly and middle-aged, living on their own, were being murdered. And it all took place in the state's capital, Lansing, Michigan. 60-year-old Professor Carolyn Cronenberg was found raped and murdered inside her classroom at Lansing Community College. She had been beaten and sexually assaulted with an electronic device. The particularly heinous crime rocked the small college and the city of Lansing as a whole. But the police were quick to make an arrest, and it all seemed neat and tidy when an intellectually disabled student named Claude McCullum confessed to the crime. A year later, he would be sentenced to life in prison for the horrible act. Case closed. Coincidentally, at the same time, a career lifelong criminal with no known association with Mr. McCullum was sentenced to 1 year in jail for a parole violation. A year passed and the community made its peace with the killing. All had returned to normal until it was July 26, 2007, when a man came knocking at the door of 76-year-old Ruth Malman. The man, fresh out of jail for a parole violation, told Miss Malman that he was seeking work. She tried to turn him away, but he pushed past her and into the house. He then grabbed a small hammer from inside the home and began to bash Ruth in the head. He would leave her alive but in serious condition. When neighbors found her, they said she had a hole in the side of her head the size of a baseball. She would die 2 days later. The killer was back. It would be a week later when 36-year-old prostitute Deborah Cook would become the killer's third victim. Approached on the street by a stranger, she walked to a nearby park looking to do a little business. The stranger would rape and brutally beat her to death. Her half-naked body would be found propped up against a tree in that very same park. 2 days later, another longtime prostitute, 46-year-old Deborah Renfer, would also be found dead. She, too, had been raped and beaten to death. It was clear now to the police that they had a serial killer on their hands, and Lansing was awash in fear and anxiety. But like most criminals, the killer was about to make a mistake. On August 27th, Sandra Eichhorn, a retiree who had worked at GM for many years, answered a knock at her door. The young man at the door offered his business card before brutally forcing his way into the home and attacking her with her own kitchen knife. 36 stab wounds later, Sandra Eichhorn was dead. But the killer had made a mistake. He had left behind the business card. The business card had actually come from a local computer store, where the day before the man had attempted to sell stolen computer parts. He had left his contact information with the store owner. The police had their first real suspect. 1 day later, the killer's second mistake would be his last. Linda Jackson, an upstanding member of the community, answered a knock at her door. The young man asked if she had any odd jobs that he could do. Although she said no, she offered to take down his name and number. When she turned to do so, the intruder attacked with an empty beer bottle. But the intruder hadn't counted on the woman's dog, Cheyenne, coming to her rescue. The intruder escaped, but the police were now certain they had their man. On August 29th, the body of 41-year-old Karen Delgado Yates was discovered by a realtor showing a vacant home. She was alive, but badly beaten. Unfortunately, she would not survive the ambulance ride to the hospital. The killer's final victim succumbed to her injuries and died. That same day, lifelong career criminal Matthew Macon was arrested for the series of brutal attacks. Like many career felons, Matthew Chili Macon came from a broken home. The home was so abusive that as a small child, he was taken from it and put into the state's foster care system. But Matthew found himself in trouble with the law very early on and was charged with his first sexual assault at the age of 14. It proved to be only the beginning. At the age of 27, Matthew Macon confessed to killing 7 in all, including the murder of Barbara Tuttle, which had not previously been tied to the killing spree. Macon would be charged and convicted of 2 murders and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He is currently housed in the Macon Correctional Facility in Macon County, Michigan. But what became of Claude McCullum, the young man wrongfully imprisoned for the killing of Professor Cronenberg? A Michigan Court of Appeals would overturn his conviction and award him $2 million after it was discovered that the prosecutor failed to release a video proving his innocence. One can't help but wonder if all those women would have died if the prosecutor cared more about finding the truth than getting a conviction. But who knows? Until next time, this is Michael McTeer for Murder in Michigan. Good night, everyone, and stay safe.